Welcome to Guest of the Year. I'm the host. My name's Mike. This week's guest setlist curator is Stephen Brower. Stephen is the global co-lead of artist relations for Amazon Music and an Aquarium Drunkard contributor. He also curates the Cosmic Strings playlist for Amazon Music, which features ambient and experimental instrumental music from guitarists and pedal steel players. I'll put that link in the show notes. Thank you for being here, Stephen. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is very exciting. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.
This week's prize pack is provided by Trout Stalkers. Trout Stalkers is run by Joe, who I'm sure everyone remembers from the episode a couple weeks ago. And he runs Trout Stalkers, which is a fly fishing outfitter, guide service, booking agency, and full service fly shop in Ennis, Montana. They do fly fishing trips around the Madison River and also to Big Hole, Beaverhead, Ruby, Jefferson, Yellowstone, Missouri. They also have a ton of dead-themed apparel and merchandise. As you'd imagine from Joe, who's a huge deadhead. Check them out, montanatrout.com. I'll link them in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Joe, for doing the prize pack. We really, really appreciate it. Here's how the game works. We'll play the first part of a Grateful Dead live track, and each contestant will use the messaging system to silently guess which year the performance is from. Contestants who are all on a video conference together can message in their guesses at any time during the clip or in the 10 seconds after it concludes. Whoever is furthest from the correct year is eliminated. The last two Deadheads standing will have a best of 3 series to determine a winner. We've got our returning champion Steve here with us, and we'll meet the rest of the Deadheads in a moment, but first, without further ado, the Grateful Dead.
God rest his soul. He taught me good love, taught me all I know, taught me so well. Well, I grabbed that gold, and I left this dead ass there by the side of the road.
Okay, the guesses are in. That was a wild me and my uncle into the other one at the Allen Theater in Cleveland, Ohio on October 29th, 1971. Sick pick, Stephen. Why that combination of songs?
That's like, I mean, I think maybe like a lot of people who come on the show, I'm a big Sirius XM Grateful Dead channel listener, and I caught that one at some point in the car maybe a couple of years ago, and just thought it was super weird. I think the whole sequence is like a cryptical other one, me and my uncle deal. Like it's like a super weird like combination. And I felt that section with the piano, and I think there's no pig pen on that show, so it, like the piano is super intense and almost feels like a film score or something. So I felt like that it's just a super unique version that I love the other one. I mean, it's my favorite like jam vehicle. So.
Is there any specific reason you chose the other one from 71?
I don't know. I mean, 71, it's like in my sort of like armchair playing of this game, I think it's like the easiest year for me to guess because it like has the sort of like just really unique quality of 71 kind of energy. I think it's that transitional period from kind of feral 60s Dead and then through the 70 records. And I don't know, I really like 71. And I think That's another reason I like the other one, I think, is because you get to see it sort of throughout the whole kind of history of the band. And I don't know, this one is just particularly tasty.
Agreed. Awesome. Well, Steve was the only one to get it exactly, 1971. Steve is our returning champ. He is 51 from Lincoln, Nebraska. Nice pull, Steve. You sent that in pretty quickly. How'd you diagnose it?
Keith, that's my favorite. If I had to pick a tour, like my desert island tour, it would be Keith's first tour across the Midwest and East Coast in the fall of 71. I love, weirdly, the sound of his piano because they haven't quite figured out how to. It's like they were. Garcia said about, I think it's like Skull and Roses album, that it was like quintessential barroom Grateful Dead. It was like Grateful Dead as a bar band, you know. And Keith, and the way his keyboard sounded was like this honky tonk ragtime maelstrom, you know. And so it just really fit into what they had going on, and it was just the energy that came, like the glee that emanates from the recordings from that time is just, I mean, they're all just having a blast, you know. And it's so obvious, and there's very little like pretense, I guess. Like they're all just out kicking ass and taking names and having a ball doing it, you know. And so I immediately just keyed in on like, well, that's fall of 71, just the tone of Keith's piano. By the time they hit the Academy of Music in March of 72, it was more refined. So I love the wild, hairy woolliness of that tour. It's just out of control, and I love it.
So you're not into like the manicured Europe 72 as much?
Oh, it's beautiful and energetic. And to quote Phil Lesh, Billy Kreutzmann played like a young god on that tour. You know, I mean, it's fantastic. I love it, but I like my Grateful Dead music ugly.
Awesome, Steve. Coming out guns blazing here. Love it.
That's right.
So the next closest was Jimmy. Jimmy is 27 from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Nice work, Jimmy. 1 year off. Why 70?
I'm actually getting a little education from Steve over here. I thought 70 was Keith's first tour.
Wow.
I figured, they hadn't dialed in the volume on Keith's piano, and it was, like he said, just grizzly, wet, and wild. It was really fun, so I could tell it was 71, 70, and basically second guess myself. Backspace the 1 and put a 0 at the last second.
Great work, Jimmy. James guessed 1973 and Shane guessed 1969. So they're both 2 years off. So everyone goes on to the next round.
Woo!
Nice work, guys. So we'll start with Shane. So Shane is 29. He's from Brooklyn by way of San Diego. Why'd you think it was 69, Shane?
The keyboard volume was just something I wasn't really familiar with at all. And like the way everything was being played. And also the speed of me and my uncle. I just thought it was somewhere in between, like 69 and 71 was like that vibe of like kind of slower me and my uncle, like kind of a different like jaunt of it. I don't know. It kind of felt like that late 60s kind of thing. And without, transition made me think it was going to be later when it just went into the other one like that without the big old bass intro that I love. But that made me think it was going to be later. But I was like, I'm just going to stick with the first kind of numbers that came into my head. So I stuck with that.
So your game plan is going with the gut.
I almost switched to be like kind of like 73 or 4 almost. I don't know why, but stuck with what I had. So maybe I'll go with that for a little bit.
Sounds good. The endless debate.
Yeah.
James, 73. Anything you want to add to the discourse here?
Yeah, I had 71 typed in, and then they went into that other one, and it was like this psychedelic crazy jam that I associate more with 73, 74. But yeah, as you were saying, 71 is like, I associate it with like bar band Dead. So yeah, I think it's just that weird, got a little psychedelic and jammy, and that I associate that more with the later 73, 74. That's why I did that.
Awesome. And I should say James is 28 from Las Vegas by way of England, right?
Yeah, originally, but I've lived in America for most of my life, so I lost the accent.
Welcome, James. And you are on to the next round along with everyone. Steven has another awesome pick. Let's hear it.
I was a like it in some direction. Althea told me upon to me that my back mine need protection. I told Althea that treachery was tearing me limb from limb. Althea told me, now, cool down, boy, settle down, easy again.
A very saucy Althea at Oakland Auditorium Arena on December 26, 1982. Fun pick, Steven. Why'd you choose that Althea?
I like Althea. I'm a huge Althea fan. I like in the Long Strange Trip documentary, I think Al Franken says something about like collecting Altheas. I really like, I always like envision, I like that sort of terminology. So I wanted to pick an Althea. I got to interview Mickey and Bob. Amazon has a feature, or had a feature called Side by Side, which is sort of a commentary feature. And they talked about that song. And the Mickey interview was like super fascinating about how he thinks it's a deceptively simple song. And so I always think about that interview and what he talked about when I'm listening to that song. I like the idea of imagining seeing the Grateful Dead the day after Christmas. I always like to sort of imagine a show. Like, I'm like, well, like, just like, am I back in my hometown? If I'm, I sort of like to put myself into the place I wasn't able to be. And then lastly, one of the reasons I like Althea is I feel like Jerry, even when he's not sounding his best, really like feels like he enjoys singing it. Like, I think it kind of has an attitude and a swagger. It's like the little shit talking. And I always sort of enjoy that. And that sort of comes through even in like his like non-peak years. So I don't know, that's sort of the context there, I guess.
How did you prepare to interview Mickey and Bob?
I think it was sort of like this, where it was a bit last minute, and I was drafted in last minute in a good way. The guy who was conducting the interview, he sort of knew what he didn't know, and he was not a deadhead. And we were going up to TRI to see Bob and to Mickey's Ranch to see Mickey. And the day before, and it was around the release of the Long Strange Trip film, and so the day before, he kind of was like, "Hey, man, I kind of want you to be my wingman, just so I don't say something embarrassing, like, I've done my research, but there's just this sort of language that you speak that I don't." And so that night I like watched the whole 6 hours. It was like a pre-release cut of Long Strange Trip. So I sat and watched the whole 6 hours just because we were sort of building the questions around that. And I just sort of thought, like, what are things we can ask about that I think might have some interesting answers? And, we were wrong. There were some things that we asked Bobby that like got like, I don't want to say one word answers, but not super kind of extensive answers. Mickey was much more, they both gave great interviews, and there was some amazing stuff, but like, I think Mickey was really ready to sort of just dive into sort of his experience of these songs over time. The way that Mickey talked about Althea particularly, I think, was that he said that he and Billy couldn't kind of figure it out for a while, and there's some really rough early Altheas. And Mickey talked about how he actually heard a tape playing back when he was at a party at Wavy Gravies or something, and he was like hearing it from afar. He like clicked into, oh, that's what we need to do. And he went back and talked to Billy, and he was like, hey, the this meter expands and contracts within the bar. So we have to slow down and speed up sort of at like, rhythmically. And he sort of like really it was just an amazing kind of like eureka moment of me even listening to the song after that and hearing that like expansion and contraction. So I think we were trying to give enough high level context for people who are just like maybe Long Straight Trip is their first thing. And then folks who are really wanting to go as deep as you can, like building some content around it, like that editorial feature that where there was that as well.
You guys totally succeeded. It was one of the best things I've watched in a long time.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, again, Steve nails it. 1982. Again, you sent it in pretty quickly, Steve. How did you figure that out? Why 82? And how did you know? Yeah.
For me, well, one of the first, I think I mentioned it last week, the first two bootleg tapes I got, one was 6/21/86 from the Greek Theater. And that's still one of my favorite second sets. It's ragged, but right. And then the other one was Red Rocks 82 first set. And the key, I never liked that tape very much. The keyboards were really high in the mix. It was like very Brent prevalent. And it was the early 80s are tricky in every regard except for Brent's keyboards, because he went in 82 to this Yamaha electric piano that has a very distinct sound. And that's what I heard on this. And then in 83, it went to the synths, and I can't remember the make of it. Now, if that would have been a song like Minglewood or something that was Hammond B3 heavy, all bets are off, because the sounds are very like from the early 80s. There's especially like 79 through 83, 82. Like it's hard to tell. Then I would key in on Phil Lesh. But that was, in this case, it was that piano.
Excellent, Steve. Fascinating. Thank you. James and Jimmy both guessed 1981. They're both on the next round. Shane guessed 1980. Sorry, Shane, you're odd man out. Let's hear James. Why 81?
Yeah, the early 80s, I'd listen for the drums. The kick drum specifically has like this thud, like it's kind of peaking every time they hit it. And that's kind of what cued me in to early 80s. Different keyboards. I can't go that specific, so that's impressive that you know the actual brand of keyboard that he's playing. But yeah, so I just guessed 81 just to kind of be safe.
What was going on with that drum?
Just like the kick drum is so punchy. It's like, yeah, they're just really, you can hear it in the mix. I don't know, really like prominently. Yeah, and just when it hits, it really like booms. It's good. I like it.
That was a playing thing or a kit thing, or why?
I think it, or like a recording thing.
Yeah, it sounds like a mic thing or something, huh?
Yeah.
Someone was rigging the mic closer for that year, and now here we are.
Yeah, or maybe they're trying to, put a different type of microphone down there, getting creative,
Wow, that's cool. Good pull, James. Yeah, and Jimmy, anything you want to add to the 81 diagnosis there?
Yeah, I was inches away from calling it a 79, just because he was messing up the lyrics, and it was kind of like a parlor-y kind of tone on the keys. I'm no Yamaha expert. I'll leave that to Steven. But Steven kind of keyed in on this, but it was the swagger that kind of tipped me off that it needed to be a little bit later. He's constantly butchering the lyrics to that one, but the way he delivered them was really, he had that step to it, and he did that one little pull-off lick that it's like a little, showing a little shoulder skin or something. I got me feeling frisky. You could tell he'd been sitting in that groove for a little while. So Jerry keyed me in on that one.
Way to go, Jimmy. On to the next round. Shane, 1980, 2 years off on an early 80s one. Why'd you guess that?
Yeah, I was getting early 80s from, his voice, Jerry's voice. And it all lies in the key sounds. And that kind of gives it away, I think, for certain years for people. Like I can't, I wasn't reading into it. I would, it was a lot louder, I think, than was used to, and just not as synthy, or, the way later years of Brent sound, I guess. It was, I just couldn't read the keys. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, nothing to hang your head about there. How did you get into the Dead?
It's been in my periphery for so long. Like I always say the pandemic was kind of where things kind of really shift for me. My dad had the Steely patch on his back. His name is Phil, so he mentioned when he was younger having a Phil Zone sticker on his helmet on his motorcycle. Didn't know what that was for a really long time until I had some friends whose parents were Deadheads in the 85, 86 era in Berkeley. It was just always around me. And then during COVID, I everything was just up in the air, and I don't know where I lined up with it, and just became almost my everyday. I was still working throughout and going to work throughout COVID, and was just listening to the Dead every single day, Dead of the Day, whatever it was. And it just fell really deep into it. And now it's my everyday still.
Lovely, Shane. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So James, Jimmy, and Steve are fighting for 2 spots in the best of 3 series. Stiff competition here. This is great. Steven's got another pick. Let's hear it. Birdsong Jam at Laguna Seca Raceway in Salinas, California on July 31st, 1988. Steven, why that Birdsong and why the jam portion?
I guess someone, and maybe Steve knows, or somebody more learned than me about these things, but like one of the sort of official Grateful Dead spokespeople at some point said that they thought that Birdsong is where Dark Star was hiding out in the 80s. And I don't know if that was Lemieux or David Gaines or someone who said that. And I just kind of wanted to reflect that in a pick. And I felt like this had that, sort of really kind of, are they going to hold it together? Like the drummers get really kind of like the falling down the stairs kind of thing is happening, and then I talked about this with the Oakland pick. I live in California. I'm from North Carolina, but I've lived in California for a long time. And I haven't been to that venue, but I've been to that part of the world. I've seen shows in that part of the world. And I felt like I could kind of, again, like imagine sort of being there. And I always like to, so that was a sort of all those elements combined to like, I think I can picture what this was like in Northern California in 1988. So that was it.
So it seems like you like being transported by shows.
Yeah, totally. And I never saw the Grateful Dead. So I guess that's part of my kind of vision questing of listening to these songs is sort of time and place. And, having seen things like Sunshine Daydream or any of the other, there's some great footage out there. Again, places I've been, there's some great footage from like Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke, where I've been to see basketball games and watching that. It's like a 3-hour show, watching that footage, I can kind of just sort of put myself there. So like, I think, when I'm listening or watching footage, it's just sort of fun to imagine the vibe and the experience, with sort of all the context that we have now with the benefit of history.
Awesome. Thanks, Steven. So everyone guessed 1989. So everyone's on to the next round.
They were flying.
Yeah. So yeah, Jimmy, why we'll start with you. Why 89?
Cause they're flying, man. It's, you know, those late 80s jams, your brain immediately goes to 89. You know, Brent's kind of got that light touch on the keys. You've got, you know, Jerry going, I almost put 90 because I thought I heard a little bit of MIDI work there on the end. But it seems like that was just, you know, a rosebud, if you will, of the MIDI experience. You know, it's just the soaring jam, you know, a good classic late 80s Bird song. 88, you know, something could have given it away, but that's for a wiser man than me to note.
James, do you know what would have given it away there?
Not specifically to 88, but I mean, I'm just stoked I got an Althea and a Bird song on the episode that I'm on. That's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was struggling to hear the keyboard, and I heard a lot of Phil, and he was jamming, and I was just like, this is definitely like 87 to 80 or to 90 probably, or yeah, definitely. But yeah.
Well, nice work. Steve, a rare 1 year off for you. Why 89?
Well, because that 88 and 89, they're tough because they sound a lot alike. The instrumentation is virtually identical. And I guessed 89 instead of 88 because 88 is usually a little bit more, like the songs are kind of shorter. You know, there's not as much as 89. They really started to kind of get weird again. And so that threw me because that Bird song was pretty loose. I liked Steven. I liked your tumbling down the stairs thing. Like I love that feeling of like falling through space, you know, and I really appreciate your comments about like envisioning, you know, looking at arena and think, oh, well, the Dead played there. And we're standing in like Cameron Stadium and knowing that, you know, the Dead were there at one point. I do the same thing, you know? And so anyway, that was a tough one.
Cool. Well, everyone's on the next round. You guys are tough to fool, but let's see if Steven can do it on this next one. So that was Cold Rain and Snow at Madison Square Garden on October 13th, 1983. Steven, nice pick again. Another early 80s song. Why that one?
Cold Rain and Snow is my favorite opener. Justice for Cold Rain and Snow. I think it's a combination of things I said earlier about Althea and the other one. Like, I like this sort of muscular quality of that riff. I think, and then I like, again, it's another song that Jerry, I think, just sort of like, he has this kind of like attitude around it. And then I like that recording because, I don't know, maybe it's just the MSG, but in being an audience, like you just hear people going nuts and like, it's like, here we go. Like, that's a great, like, opening the first set. I think my favorite Cold Rain and Snow is the Lyceum, but I didn't want to do that one. I felt like that would have been too easy. So I just was looking for another Cold Rain and Snow.
Yes, you sent me these specific tapes. Do you like listening to the audience recordings especially?
Not necessarily. Sometimes. So, and like this one has the thing that I like sometimes of like being able to feel what the vibe was. Like, you know, great if it's a great Betty Board or great Charlie Miller or whatever, those are awesome. But sometimes just like feeling like people were really chill or people were really going for it. Maybe it is that transport thing that comes through in an odd.
So like the slightly worse quality doesn't bug you?
Not really. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
The best is when you can hear somebody calling for his buddy.
Oh yeah.
Mike,
Yeah.
I'm the idiot waving.
Yeah.
So what do you know? Steve got it exactly, 1983. What's up, Steve? Talk to us.
Well, I already said the answer, which was there's Brent playing the organ in the early 80s. And so I listened to Phil. And 83 was when he started playing. I don't remember the make of it exactly, but it was 6-string bass and it has a kind of a unique tone. It was like 81 and 82. He moved from the Irwin bass to like basically, I think it was like a Fender knockoff. I don't know who made it, but I don't mean knockoff, it's in lower quality. I mean better than, but so that was what gave it away. And Jerry's voice too. It's kind of distinct in 83. He's moving from the sweet Jerry to the bellowing Jerry. There's that transition there. I wanted to give a shout out to this book, if you don't mind. It's by Blair Jackson, and it's called Grateful Dead Gear, the band's instruments, sound systems, and recording sessions from 65 to 95. And it's fantastic. It's a very deep dive in all of the Dead's equipment. So if you want to know, like when I start throwing out instrument names, it's from that book. And it's still available. I don't know if it's still in print, but it's still available. Can't recommend it enough. If you're a gearhead and just want to know how how does that sound that way? That book's awesome.
Is it like an encyclopedia kind of, or is it?
It's just, it's not exactly an encyclopedia. It's just, it literally goes through from 65 to 95, all of the gear that they were using, including like Jerry's Guild guitar and Pig's Vox organ through the wall of sound and everything that went into that. Phil's PIE bass amps in the 80s that were insane. Like 4,000 watts each, and he had 2 of them. I mean, like it goes into that low. And Bobby and the Cowboy Fancy Ibanez and his movement, and Bobby is the one that led the MIDI charge, for better or for worse. And everybody else went, well, I want to play with that. It goes through all of that in really great detail. It's just a fantastic book. Can't recommend it enough.
Awesome. Yeah, so James guessed 1981 and Jimmy guessed 1985. So they're both 2 years off. So everyone's on to the next round again. James, talk to us. Why 81?
Yeah, it was that bass drum was still kicking really hard. So I was like, it's definitely early 80s. And I was like, it's not 82. I think. So 83 or 81. And I just went with 81.
Playing the game.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, why 85?
Yeah, I definitely heard the weakness in Jerry's voice, which I am kind of partial to. I really like it. I think that's a really, really great call by Steve. Right, the transition from sweetness into warble and crooning. But the thing that threw me off was it's MSG. I could hear it was a bigger room, and I could hear they were nice and settled into a slower Cold Rain and Snow. So I figured 85, it's got to be a little bit after 83, but not 83. Go with the gut.
There you go, Jimmy. We've got another song for you. Let's hear it.
Train to Jacksonville. Gonna get on it, baby, and you know I will. Come on and try. Go ahead and try to forget all the pain I brought you. Gonna cry, baby. Go ahead and cry. You know I'm the one who taught you. I'm lonely, baby. I'm lonely and blue. I'm
Okay. Are You Lonely for Me, Baby? At Academy of Music in New York City on March 25th, 1972. Steven, that's an obscure one, of course. Why that song?
I love it. Like, again, it goes back to that sort of like attitude swagger thing, I think. And like, I heard it on Sirius a few years ago. I was like, what is this? what is this song? I've never heard this song. I like took a picture of the radio and texted it to my buddy. And he was like, I don't know that song. And I didn't know the Academy shows that well at the time. And I think it's on Dick Picks 30, but I didn't have that. Anyway, it's the only time I ever played the song. And I just love that groove, the sort of like backbeat. Like, yeah, I think it's just really fun to listen to. It was fun to watch everybody sort of getting into the groove, because that's exactly my experience of that song. I'm maybe guessing that maybe everybody got it exactly right. I don't know, but I still wanted people to hear it and to sort of give some shine to Are You Lonely for Me, Baby?
Yeah, I'd never heard that song before you sent it over, and now I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I could have listened to that all day.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Steve got it exactly, 1972, but he was the only one to get it exactly. Steve, why 72?
Academy of Music. I knew the show. I knew that was just luck. Can't remember if it's the same night, but Bo Diddley's there.
Yeah, it is. That's the same show.
Okay. Yeah. And the Bo Diddley set's great. And so that's where I've heard it.
Great. Well, this is a lot like the Laura show with endless ties, because Jimmy gets 73 and James gets 71. So everyone's on in the next round again. If this goes to 10 songs, then Steven's going to start picking drums and spaces. So
right.
We'll see what happens. So yeah, Jimmy, why'd you get 73?
I knew so I was off on two fronts. I was off on the year, and I thought it was BB King and not Bo Diddley. But my mind was, in the right place. I knew it was that special set of shows. I knew it was a rarity. I've heard this run before. Just thought it was 73. Got my wires crossed.
Not crossed by much.
Not crossed enough.
James, why 71?
I first heard 76 because I was like, they're kind of getting into like Motown-y feeling, and the audio quality sounded kind of 76-y, but I went back to like 71 is bar band Dead. I know those shows. I've listened to Dick Picks 30, so I should have known better.
You're forgiven.
I'm kicking myself too.
Great pick, man.
Okay, let's play another song.
Our captain fell in love with a lady like a dove, and he called her by name, pretty Peggy-O. Will you marry me, pretty Peggy-O? Will you marry me, pretty Peggy-O? If you will marry me, I'll set your cities free. Free all the ladies in the area. I would marry you, sweet William O. I would marry you, sweet William O. I would marry you, but your guineas are too few, and I fear my mama would be angry. Oh.
Someone is eliminated. The plot thickens. That was a Peggy-O at Greensboro Coliseum in North Carolina, Steven's home state, on October 9th, 1983. Steven, why'd you pick that Peggy-O?
I like Peggy-O, and this is I'm from a town called Asheboro, North Carolina, which is exactly 26 miles straight down Interstate 220 or Interstate 74, 75 now, Highway 220 from Greensboro, North Carolina. So this is probably the Grateful Dead show that took place in the closest proximity to my hometown. So goes back to like the thing of like, I've been there a million times. I can sort of like put myself in the room and I like Peggy-O, so.
Nice. The closest was Steve, who guessed 1984. Steve, do you think it was an 84, or do you think you weren't going to get another 83?
I was a toss-up between 83 and 84. The only differentiation for me was I thought maybe the keys sounded a little less 83 synthy and a little more 84 synthy. That's it.
Hell yeah. Okay, so Jimmy guessed 1989 and James guessed 1979. They're a decade apart, but James was a little closer. James, you're on to the finals to face Steve. Why did you guess 1979?
I think the Peggy-O's I know the best are like 78-ish. So maybe I was just biased towards that a little bit. Yeah, that's that.
Well, you're on to the finals. Nice work, James. Jimmy, 89. What were you thinking there?
Man, it was just so pretty. I really thought I had it with the 89. I heard Brent's keys back there doing nice light work. I should have known the 83 tempo runs true.
Well, Jimmy, how did you get into the Dead?
I think Eyes of the World is the first song I remember. My mother was into it. It was just always playing when I was growing up. I gravitated away from it a little bit in my 10-year-old days, doing my homework on the Beatles and stuff like that, but eventually came right back around and been falling harder and harder in love ever since. So it's just been great.
Do you have a favorite era for the song?
I mean, I love the evolution of the song. I love the crazy bassy jams all the way at the end of the, early iterations in 73, 74. I love how, just widely expansive it is as a whole catalog song. I love it lyrically. It's one of my favorite songs to play. I mean, it's just touching in every single sense of the word. It's ignited a lifelong love affair with the Grateful Dead that spans, all over the entire globe. Got me here, it's got me there, it's got me everywhere.
Do you have a favorite pairing with Eyes?
If I find a show that's got a Here Comes Sunshine and the Eyes of the World in them together, then I know I'm in for a day. I'm gonna be in a good mood for a week after that one.
Awesome. Brilliant work. Loved your analysis. Yeah, thanks for being here, Jimmy.
Happy to. Thank you, guys.
So Steve and James are on to the finals, and they are competing for the Montana Trout prize pack. Thank you again to Joe. And yeah. All right, let's hear the first song in the finals.
What's it true?
Okay, great. So deal at the Swing Auditorium in San Bernardino, California on February 26th, 1977. Steven, great deal. We're all bobbing our heads here. Why that one?
It's my favorite show. 22677, like first Terrapin, first Estimated. They love each other. It's just awesome. This is kind of like my cold rating. So I love a first set closing deal. Like I just love I just like all of that. I think you guys have gotten a sense of the types of songs I like to hear Jerry sing. And so I just wanted to showcase a great deal from my favorite show.
Cool. Well, Steve got it, 1977, and James gets 73. So Steve, you knew what was going on there. How'd you idea?
I knew exactly what show it was before Phil dropped in.
No shit.
That was my first high quality, like second gen tape I ever had. I was at Buckeye Lake, Ohio in the summer of 91. And there was a guy standing next to me. I had some lemonade, then he was thirsty and he had some things that I didn't have that I wanted. So we shared and we became friends. And he had a radio show like on community radio. I want to say in Columbus or Cincinnati. I could be wrong. But anyway, we exchanged addresses. And like a month later, he sent me that show from his, like, I think probably second gen reels. So it was really crispy. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how good it sounded, you know, and me and my buddy, Chris, that's all we did the rest of that summer was listen to that tape. When Phil drops in on that first Terrapin, it's incredible. It's just incredible. And that's my favorite Terrapin station. It's just shiny like a new penny, man. It's perfect.
Steven, you were saying that you were nodding along that's your favorite Terrapin too.
Well, I've said this before, like that to some friends that like there's this famous story that Francis Ford Coppola like hid in the projection booth during the premiere of The Godfather 2 because he didn't know if it was any good. And of course, it's like a masterpiece. I feel like that's how that Terrapin sounds. There's like a hesitancy. There's like that sort of like trepidation is in the song, and that's I love it.
Love that. James, 73. Walk us through it.
I only heard one drummer, so that threw me off, but I should have keyed into the kind of disco-y dead drumming that was, 77, 78.
Steve goes up 1-0 in the series, but James, before we move on, how did you get into the Dead?
Oh, yeah. I got into the Dead after college. I moved to Alaska to work the seasonal job, and I started trying to learn banjo, and I picked up the banjo, and I got into the I think I had heard a couple Dead songs. I found Jerry Garcia, obviously everyone knows, great banjo player. He had this album on, I think I found it on like YouTube, the Heart Valley Drifters. That's like pre-Dead. It's like early bluegrassy Jerry, and plays like a Sitting on Top of the World that I loved. And I was like, this is amazing. So that was like my little peek into it. Also, similar to Shane, I'm like a COVID lockdown kind of like exacerbated my obsession. And I got this job in 2020 where I was doing a lot of long drives. And so I would just put on full shows. And after Alaska, I moved to Portland, Oregon, and was driving through the Columbia River Gorge like once a week for like 4 hours a day and just listening to that the whole time. And listening to this podcast, 36 from the Vault, where these two guys just...
Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah. I think that kind of helped me like learn more about the lore of the Dead too. So shout out to those guys. Yeah, and then now it's just like part of my life. And like girlfriend's parents they saw Dylan in the Dead in like 87 in Eugene, Oregon. And I just like to connect to people. It's like a great way to connect to people more about it. So kind of my story.
James, it's funny that you mentioned that made that connection between banjo and Althea. In that interview, the Mickey Hart interview, he specifically talks about how it's a Jerry banjo thing. Like he brought it was like sort of a banjo lick that he turned into that Althea lick. And that's why that was sort of part of that kind of struggle with like working it into like a sort of a constant meter. And it like that although it's obviously much later, it sort of grew out of the Jerry Banjo kind of history.
That's incredible. You can kind of hear it too. Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He's kind of
You
finger
can't
picking.
unhear it once you say it, like you know.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Steven, that's actually a good segue. How did you get into Dead, and how did you end up, interviewing Bob Weir and Mickey Hart, and also and like tell us a little about your job at Amazon, and please.
So I got into the Dead. I think the answer would be like which time, because I sort of had a couple like sort of stints in high school. I think somebody had, or maybe it was even middle school or something, somebody had Skeletons from the Closet, and then so I was into sort of that at a very, very early. And then I got a job as a dishwasher at a restaurant, and there was a guy that worked in the kitchen that had tape. We started trading tapes, and I would trade him non-Dead stuff for tapes, and like I would have like Allman Brothers CDs or whatever, and like and traded him stuff for t-shirts and CD and tapes, and then like when I went to college at the University of North Carolina, I went away from the Dead for a while, and I got really into actually it's a good segue. Actually, I was into like really into this like roots music scene, and actually started working for a bluegrass record label, Sugar Hill Records, that was based in Durham, North Carolina. And worked there for a long time, and didn't listen to the Dead really at all. I mean, obviously there was a very specific connection, to bluegrass, and actually bluegrass in North Carolina to the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia. I ended up moving out to California and working. I started working for record labels for quite a long time. I worked for Vanguard Records and Sugar Hill Records, and I moved into an apartment, and like I didn't have my stuff yet, and I had like one television. And I didn't have internet set up, so I just had like the over-the-air like television like plugged in, and I couldn't sleep, and I was like sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag because I didn't have a bed in the apartment yet. And the Grateful Dead movie was on like the PBS pledge drive, and that Morning Dew, and I was like back in, and then I was like, wait, I dug out Europe '72, and then I was just like fully back in, and then. Sort of, I don't know, that was kind of ever since. I went to fairly well, like, I don't know, just, I've sort of done as much of it as I can ever since, and really sort of embraced the community and all folks like you guys. And it's like super helpful in my job. I do artist relations at Amazon Music, and I've worked with bands for years. Even when I wasn't into the Dead, I worked with Widespread Panic, I worked with Mo, I worked with Yonder Mountain String Band, and like, just like sort of speaking the language, even in the years where I wasn't really listening to the band that much, just kind of earned me trust with those guys. And that's the one thing that I've learned in any artist that I've ever worked with in this job or any previous job, is just sort of like listening to what they care about, and sort of meeting them on their own terms, and sort of feeling, my job is to sort of understand how I can help artists and what they need and what they care about. And I don't know, this sort of common vernacular was always a good way to do that, and when I would have a conversation with any of those bands, there was just sort of like it was just kind of like a pass key to having a real conversation about like what we were going to do together. So yeah, I think that's my story.
So a lot of bands care about the Grateful Dead. Yeah,
a lot of bands care about the Grateful Dead, and I've just had some great experiences over the years. I worked with had the great fortune to work with Levon Helm before he passed, and worked on the documentary In It For My Health. I was a producer on that, and like, so was working with Levon when he recorded Tennessee Jed for the record Electric Dirt. That was just a really fun like point in time. Obviously, it's just like, holy shit, I get to work with Levon, but then just the sort of like the sort of collision of all those things. And then at the time that was going on, the Black Crowes made a record at Levon's place, and so I got to talk to those guys about the Dead, and like, it's just been a real, like I say, it's just kind of a sort of a skeleton key to a lot of artists and just people who've been around and care about music.
So Aquarium Drunkard, which you're a contributor to, covers a lot of iconoclastic, eclectic music. So you must listen to a whole bunch of stuff in addition to the Dead.
Sure. Yeah, no, I've definitely, I don't know. I feel like I'm definitely a seeker of music. I love it when I Shazam something and there's like been 4 Shazams of it. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm onto something really new. I live in Los Angeles, and There's a great radio station, KXLU. I partly love it because it is like, holy shit. Sometimes it's just the weirdest stuff I can imagine. And there was one time I was driving to the airport at like 4 a.m. for like a 6 a.m. flight. It was the craziest thing I've ever heard on the radio. And I was like, what is this? And it wouldn't Shazam. And then the disc jockey comes on, and it's just a student that they have on the 4 a.m. shift. And he was literally playing 2 songs at the same time. And he comes back on, and he's like, "Oh shit, sorry you guys. I was pressed play on both CD players. Sorry." And I was like, "That was amazing." But like,
amazing.
I was like, I was in. I was like, whatever it is, it's working. But like, I guess that just is sort of like pretty open-minded, yes, in terms of like what I will sort of be willing to kind of investigate and really sort of see like, hey, what are they going for here? Is this good? Is it great? Is it terrible? I'm sort of open to all possibilities.
And do you feel like seeking out and sitting with a song that's maybe not immediately accessible is a skill, or is it innate for you?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's innate in the sense of like, and I feel like I'm this way about film and art and other things too, where I'm kind of open to something that is challenging in a pretty aggressive way. But I think it is something that, as my job, I've kind of honed over the years, because I go to the biggest pop shows in the world too, and I like find the craft in that, and I'm like, oh wow, this is what Harry Styles is going for at the Forum, and like, wow, people are really going for it, and like, and just sort of meeting it on its own terms, is something that I really kind of challenge myself to do, kind of across the spectrum.
Yeah, that works in life too, not just music.
Totally.
Cool, Steven. Thanks so much. Steve is up 1-0 in the series. Let's hear the song.
State car passing me by, the buses and semis, plunging like stones from a slingshot on Mars. But I'm here by the road, bound too low. I picked up in 10,000 cafes and bars. Along with the rush of the drivers that won't pick me up. The highway, the moon, the clouds and the stars. The black-throated wind keeps on driving in with its words of a lie, where nothing is new. And I'm another American now. I'm lost from the lie.
Okay, so it was Black-Throated Wind at Autzen Stadium at the University of Oregon on June 17th, 1994. Steven, rare to see here at 94 on the show. Thank you for bringing it. Why that Black-Throated Wind?
Well, I'm a big Black-Throated Wind fan for one thing. I love that riff. I love a muscular riff. But I wanted to play something from this Autzen show I like the Autzen shows in 94, and for a particular reason. I worked with the band Cracker for a while, and Camper Van Beethoven, and they actually opened those shows, which is sort of rare in itself. And I always found it fascinating. So Cracker played Loser in the opening set. And I was always like, and I've never asked the band, who I'm still in contact with, and maybe I will, like, did you ask like if that was cool or whatever? But I listened back to the Cracker set, which is also on archive, and David Lowery is like, hey, we want to dedicate this song to our gracious hosts, and then they play Loser. But I just always thought that, and I think they played it every day. of that run, and I always thought that was fascinating. And then the other reason I wanted to play this, or as I was sort of looking back at the show, I was like, wait a second, why is that date familiar? And it's like, this is the OJ chase. It's like literally happening like at this moment. And Another American Night, it's like kind of like an extraordinary American Night. So I don't know. Again, it goes back to that thing of like putting yourself in a place. I'm like, this is pre-cell phone. It's pre-internet. Like people are going to walk out of this show and be like, what? OJ Simpson ran? So like that. And then, but yeah, really, I started at a place of I wanted to play this and talk about Cracker playing Loser in that opening set. And so Loser's on Cracker's second record, and it's a great version if you don't know it, so check that out. And so I assume maybe that's why they got asked to do the shows, and that record was out at the time, and it was a big hit. It has the song Low on it, which is their biggest hit. But the Cracker sets are great. The Austin shows are really fun. It's just fun to listen to a big, huge stadium show. So yeah, that was it.
Damn, that's chock full of trivia there. That's awesome. So Steve has repeated as Guest of the Year champ because he guessed 1994 exactly. James guessed 1984. Nice run, James. Steve's just unstoppable right now. Steve, how'd you get 94?
Okay, well, I referenced this last week. First of all, it was Lightning Bolt guitar by the Kripe Guitar. It has a very unique tone, and I actually heard the first shows with that at Austin the year before in 93, and he didn't play it in 95. I think he went back to Rosebud in the fall of 94. He didn't play it for very long, so that was dead giveaway. But so it could have been late 93 or through summer of 94, but it was John Cutler running front of house sound and not Dan Healy. The drums were the dead giveaway. It's a very distinct sound difference. Cutler approached the percussion with a completely different mindset. And so that's how I narrowed it down to, I didn't know I figured it was summer 94. And also Garcia's struggling a little bit. And that's when that really became apparent that he was having a hard time, was that summer. There were moments of, good old Jerry Garcia, and there were moments of, oh boy, and so I heard some of that in there too.
Yeah. So what are you hearing when you're like, ooh, that's a tough little lick there by Jerry?
Well, he was struggling on two fronts. Well, multiple fronts, all the fronts actually. But somebody referenced one of the recent ones, Chin on Chest Garcia. They were talking about that was from the 80s. And the way I see in 94 and 95 is, and I'm going to tear up saying this, just sad Jerry. He just looked sad. He looked just heartbroken and sad and powerless. And to see Jerry goddamn Garcia look that way was really hard, And it wasn't always like that. I was listening to 10-1-94 last night, which is one of my favorite shows. And he's struggling a little bit, but he's there, man. It's Jerry Garcia in full effect, But the summer of 94, I'll never forget this. I was working in a store at the time here in Lincoln. I had just come back to Lincoln, and I was insane. But I was wondering what was going on. Came from Lake Tahoe, and a guy came into my store, this big dude that probably was a biker, and he just had a white T-shirt with a Steal Your Face Summer Tour 94 on it. And I went up to him, and he like braced himself, like, what is this guy about? And I'm like, where'd you get that shirt? How was the show? It's like, where'd you go? and he went, oh, and he just looked, he just said, it was sad. It was sad. And that was all he could, and he made it very clear that was all he had to say on the subject. He was obviously an old school head that, it was tough. And I saw August of 93 in Autzen, and then I didn't see him again until the Palace in Detroit in 95. And, I came away from those Detroit shows just kind of decimated, really. There was something just obviously very, very wrong. And it seemed like most people didn't care. That was my impression, like whatever, play the songs and I just came away from that really kind of disheartened, I guess. And so it's really been gratifying to see kind of how things have shaken out over the past, whatever, 28 years, right? Like, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned, and things are great right now, in terms of the community and what's happening. I mean, are you kidding? It's like a hydra, I feel like Garcia went when he was supposed to go. You know what I'm saying? And I hate to say that, but that was really in my heart of hearts. The guy saved my life. The Grateful Dead and saved my life, and so I owe everything to them. But in hindsight, maybe things worked out the way they were supposed to. Because things are, it's great today. There's so much music. There's way more music that I could ever go see. And it's all really good, even if it's not exactly my cup of tea. Like, there's a wrench out there to fit every nut for music right now, and so things are great.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for that. James, 84. What were you hearing?
Yeah, I think what Steve was saying about the 90s being sad is kind of why I tend to avoid listening to them. I mean, I know there are some great shows, and it sucks because the recording quality is so good for so many of those shows that, you're really peaking in like digital recording Grateful Dead quality. But I just tend to not listen to a lot of 90s. So my brain wasn't, I knew going into this that it was going to be hard if there was something in the 90s, unless you can hear a piano or two pianos, then it's pretty clear. But other than that, it's tough. So yeah, I felt like I kind of took a shot in the dark. But great game, everyone.
Yeah, this is you guys. This is just awesome. It's so cool to hang out with like-minded people, that I can say things like what I just said, and people don't just go, well, I guess we'll go stand over there now.
James, great run. Steve, nice repeat.
Steve, formidable opponent. Very well.
Yeah.
This is the one arena. So thank you, Mike. This is the one arena where all of these years are beneficial.
Totally.
All the years combined.
That's exactly right.
Steven, thank you so much for curating this amazing set list and for, lending your insight and your perspective. It was a pleasure.
Oh, no, it's great to be here and get to meet you guys. This was a blast.
Thanks so much, Steven. And again, everyone can check out Steven's Cosmic Strings playlist via Amazon Music. In the show notes, I've been vibing out to it very hard. It has a really, really great mix of artists that you'll recognize, maybe some you don't. I know I like Mac DeMarco and Steve Gunn and like Kevin Morby. All of them are on there. And then there's some other people I've never heard before, but it's you could tell it's handpicked by Steven, who clearly knows his stuff. So yeah, everyone should check that one out. Okay, subscribe to Guest of the Year on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and now Amazon Music. For all the show links, including our new YouTube channel, you can go to guestoftheyear.net. And if you want to be a contestant on the show, sponsor the show, or make comments and ask questions, email us at info@guestoftheyear.net. Shout out to Joe and everyone at Montana Trout Stalkers for sponsoring this episode's prize pack. You can check out Montana Trout Stalkers via the link in the show notes. Thanks to Dylan for drawing the posters and Mason for curating the prize packs. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the amazing tapers whose recordings made this show possible. Congratulations to our back-to-back champ, Steve. And to our other contestants, thanks for playing, and remember, it's all one song anyway.
And I bid you good night, good night, good night. And I bid you good night, good night, good night.